Would you remember the face of the one you love, if the world demanded you let them go? Would the echo of their words be enough to carry you through the darkest uncertainty, with nothing but a memory to hold on to? On a rain-swept morning in late 1942, Pittsburgh's Union Station was a place of urgency and parting. The platforms pulsed with movement, soldiers in pressed uniforms, families clinging tightly, children craning for one last glimpse of fathers and brothers vanishing into the grey. Steam from the engine curled around boots and suitcase wheels, dissolving into the haze above. Overhead, the iron and glass roof drummed with a persistent rain, turning the city's dawn into a watercolor of wet stone and muted neon. In the heart of the crowd, Mina Takahashi stood nearly motionless, her slender fingers entwined with Elijah Rose. Elijah, taller but slightly stooped by the weight of his pack, stared at her with an expression both resolute and aching. The train's whistle shrieked, a sound that sliced through the anxious hush. Mina's coat was damp, the hem darkened by puddles. Her hair, usually kept in a tidy knot for the newsroom, now clung in black strands to her cheek. She tried to memorize every line of Elijah's face, the gentle dip of his brow, the way his eyes, clear, blue, and impossibly kind, never seemed to waver, even as the world around them did. The station's electric lamps reflected soft gold in his gaze, but there was a shadow there too, the kind only parting could leave. "Promise me," she whispered, barely audible beneath the clatter of trunks and the conductor's calls. "Don't forget me, Elijah." He squeezed her hand, his thumb tracing a nervous circle on her knuckle. "Mina," he replied, voice low and steady, "I couldn't forget you if I tried." The moment lingered, stretched thin by the knowledge that, in minutes, the train would carry him away, first to basic training, then across the Atlantic, and into a war that cared little for promises. Mina's breath caught as she fought back tears. Elijah reached up, brushed a raindrop or perhaps a tear from her cheek with the back of his hand. His touch was tender, almost reverent. Behind them, Elijah's mother, Ruth Rowe, stood with her husband and younger daughter, hands clasped tight in front of her, as if in silent prayer. Their family had gathered in the living room at dawn, the air thick with the scent of coffee and the hush of unspoken worry. Ruth had pressed a wool scarf into Elijah's hands before they left, her eyes shining with pride and fear in equal measure. Mina remembered the way Ruth had hugged her too, close and warm, as if drawing strength from Mina's steady presence. The Rowe home, a brick walk-up on Forbes Avenue, was filled with books and laughter and the quiet orderliness of lives lived generously. Elijah had grown up there, surrounded by shelves stacked too deep with novels and lesson plans, and by the constant encouragement of parents who valued kindness above all else. It was this gentle foundation that gave Elijah his steadiness, his loyalty, his calm in the face of storm. And it was this steadiness that Mina clung to now, as the world threatened to sweep them away. But Mina's world, too, was changing. Her parents, Kenji and Aiko Takahashi, had come to America 30 years before. They owned a modest apartment above a bakery in Squirrel Hill, where the scent of sweet rice and fresh bread drifted through the halls. The Takahashis kept their heads down, worked hard, and hoped that quiet dignity would shield them from suspicion. But even before Pearl Harbor, Mina had sensed the subtle exclusion. Averted gazes, clipped conversations, the way her teacher paused over her last name during roll call. Now, with the country at war and anti-Japanese sentiment growing, every glance in the street felt loaded. Mina's badge at the newspaper, a plain metal rectangle that read Pittsburgh Daily Dispatch Reporter, was both a shield and a target. The city, usually bustling with the hope of steel and possibility, had grown wary. Mina could feel it in the way strangers' eyes lingered, in the sudden caution of neighbors who once shared tea and gossip. And yet, here she was, standing in the rain with the man she loved, determined not to let the world define the limits of her heart. Hey Porter brushed past, apologizing as he nearly clipped Mina's shoulder with a heavy trunk. Elijah glanced at the clock above the platform, 7:14 a.m. The train was scheduled to leave at 7:20. Every second felt precious, stolen from fate. "I wish you didn't have to go," Mina said. She tried to sound brave, but her voice trembled. Elijah managed a small smile, the kind that always made her believe everything might still be all right. "If I didn't go, I'd never forgive myself. But I'll come back. For you. For us. He reached into his coat pocket, fumbling for a moment, and pressed a folded piece of paper into her palm. It's not much, he said, but I wrote you something, just in case the train leaves faster than my words. Mina blinked rapidly, tucking the note into her purse. I have something for you too. She glanced around, then slipped a slender envelope into the side pocket of his duffel. Don't open it until you're on the train. Promise. I promise, Elijah said, the words heavy with meaning. The conductor's voice boomed. All aboard for Harrisburg, Philadelphia, and Points East, final call. A sudden hush descended as families offered hurried farewells. Mina's heart hammered so loudly, she was sure Elijah could hear it. She wanted to say something more, something that would last beyond the distance, beyond the war. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she gripped his hand one last time, memorizing the feel of his rough skin, the gentle certainty of his touch. Don't forget me, she whispered again. Her voice was steadier this time. It was not a plea, but a command, a vow between them. Elijah leaned in, pressing his lips softly to her forehead. The world around them, the steam, the rain, the restless shuffling of the crowd, seemed to fade. For a heartbeat, there was only the promise of return. I love you, Mina, he said. A rush of movement pulled him away. Elijah's family embraced him quickly, Ruth dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Mina watched as he boarded the train, his silhouette framed in the doorway. Their eyes locked through the glass as the engine rumbled to life. Mina pressed her hand to the window. Elijah mirrored her gesture on the other side, his breath fogging the pain. The train lurched, wheels grinding against steel, and slowly pulled away from the platform. Mina stood rooted, watching until his face became a blur in the rain, until the train's whistle faded into the morning. She didn't move, not even as the station emptied around her, not even as the rain soaked through her coat and chilled her bones. She waited until the red caboose disappeared beyond the curve, clinging to the warmth of his promise. Only then did she turn, shoulders squared, and walk back toward the city. The newsroom was a world apart from the somber rituals of farewell. It buzzed with the clatter of typewriters, the metallic ring of telephones, the scent of ink and cigarettes. Mina's desk sat near the window, crowded with clippings and a battered underwood. Her editor, Mr. Grady, barked instructions over the din, his voice sharp with urgency. Mina ducked her head and settled into her chair, trying to compose herself. She reached for her notebook, fingers trembling. News of the war dominated every page. Casualty lists, troop deployments, rationing updates. The city's streets pulsed with change. Blackout curtains drawn tight, ration lines snaking around corners, the constant rumble of trucks from the steel mills. Mina's articles, once filled with community events and neighborhood fairs, now chronicled the war's intrusion into daily life. She wrote about mothers working assembly lines, schoolchildren collecting scrap metal, and the quiet heroism of those left behind. But lately Mr. Grady had begun assigning her the safe stories, garden clubs, bake sales, anything that kept her out of the spotlight. She noticed it in the way her colleagues' conversations paused when she entered the room, the half-hearted smiles, the way her byline appeared less frequently. One afternoon, as she gathered her notes for a story about a new Red Cross chapter, a passing reporter muttered, "Surprised she's still here." Mina bit her tongue, refusing to flinch. After work, she walked the city's streets, umbrella raised against the drizzle. She passed the library where she and Elijah had spent hours discussing books and dreams, the bakery where her mother sometimes slipped her a warm roll for the journey home, the park bench where she and Elijah once watched the fireworks rise over the river. The city was changing, faster, harder, more uncertain. Posters plastered to telephone poles warned citizens to report suspicious activity. Mina felt the eyes of strangers linger on her face, searching for something more than her features betrayed. She straightened her shoulders, forced herself to meet their gaze. At home, the Takahashi apartment was a haven of warmth and routine. Mina's father greeted her at the door, his hands dusted with flour from the bakery below. Her mother tended a small altar by the window, lighting incense and offering prayers for Elijah's safety, for Mina's strength, for peace to return. They ate together each night, bowls of rice and pickled vegetables, conversation gentle but edged with worry. Mina's younger brother, Hero, peppered her with questions about the war, about Elijah, about whether things would ever go back to the way they were. Mina smiled, ruffling his hair. "Things will change," she said, "but we'll find our way, we always do." Elijah's first night away from home was spent in a crowded barracks outside Harrisburg, the air thick with the scent of damp wool and nervous energy. He lay awake, listening to the soft snores of the men around him, the distant echo of boots in the corridor. In the darkness, he reached into his duffel and found Mina's letter. He hesitated, savoring the anticipation. Then, with careful fingers, he unfolded the envelope and read, "Asterisk Elijah, asterisk asterisk. If you're reading this, you're already gone. I wish I could be there to say this in person, but I know words sometimes last longer than voices. Asterisk. I believe in you. I believe in what you're doing, even though it scares me. I'll be waiting for you every day, every moment until you come home. Don't forget me. Not just the person I am, but the person I want to be when you return. I want you to know I'm proud of you. I'm proud to love you. Asterisk. Come back to me. Mina." The words glowed in the pale moonlight, and Elijah pressed the letter to his chest. He thought of Mina's quiet strength, her unwavering hope, and felt a resolve settle in his heart. In the weeks that followed, letters became their lifeline. Mina wrote of the city's pulse, of the autumn leaves burning gold along the river, of the small kindnesses that made the days bearable. She hid her fears behind stories of her family, her work, the little triumphs and heartbreaks of daily life. Elijah replied with careful words, never mentioning the grim details of his training, the rumors of coming danger, but always returning to the promise he made on the platform. Each letter was a thread, binding them across the miles. But as autumn turned to winter, the world grew colder. In Pittsburgh, the mood tightened. Headlines screamed of battles overseas. Whispers in the market grew sharper. Mina's father was questioned by a local official, his bakery's windows smeared with frost and suspicion. Mina's paper ran a story about enemy aliens that made her stomach twist. At the Row home, Ruth wrote to Elijah every week, filling pages with news of the neighborhood, stories of his sister's schoolwork, updates on the family dog. She always included a line about Mina. "She stopped by with bread for us," or "We all miss you, even more so because Mina keeps us hopeful." Ruth's affection for Mina was unmistakable, but Elijah knew that each letter was touched with worry. On a grey December evening, Mina sat at her desk staring at a blank page. The city's Christmas lights flickered outside, a fragile attempt at normalcy. She heard a knock at the door, her father holding a telegram. Her hands shook as she unfolded it, not from Elijah, just a government notice reminding all Japanese-American residents to report their whereabouts. Mina's chest tightened. She thought of Elijah, so far away, and wondered if he knew how quickly the world was closing in. She returned to her letter, pen poised. Asterisk Elijah, asterisk asterisk. The world is changing so fast. Sometimes I worry that I'll wake up and not recognize my own city, my own street. But I remember your promise. I remember your hand in mine on the platform, the rain on your coat, the look in your eyes. I won't let them take that from me. Asterisk, I won't let them take you from me, not in my heart. Not ever. Don't forget me. I am still here. Waiting. Her words were a lifeline, cast across oceans and uncertainty. She sealed the letter, pressed her lips to the envelope and sent it off into the unknown. Outside, the city of Pittsburgh seemed to pause, suspended between the old world and the new. Elijah's train sped eastward. Mina's letters crossed the continent and the Atlantic, and both clung to the hope that love, fragile, stubborn, enduring, could survive the distance. The rain finally let up, leaving the streets glistening under the street. A brittle wind swept across the flat, open fields of southern England, rattling the canvas sides of the army tent and finding every gap in Elijah Rowe's standard-issue wool coat. The world here was grey, clouds pressed low, mud clung to boots and uniforms, and the promise of spring felt impossibly distant. Still, it was only December. Elijah sat hunched on his cot, a battered notebook open on his lap, pencil unmoving in his hand. Around him, the barracks murmured with the sounds of men settling in after a cold, damp patrol. The slap of playing cards, the scrape of boots, a cough muffled in the crook of an elbow. He tried to recall the warmth of Mina's gloved hand in his, the scent of rain on her coat, the tremor in her voice as she'd whispered, "Don't forget me." Her words echoed every night, her face vivid in memory, even as the world demanded he let her go. His fingers brushed the envelope he carried always in his chest pocket, edges soft from countless readings. Mina's latest letter had arrived yesterday, a rare bright spot in the monotony of military routine. The mailroom was a lifeline here, its small window watched with hungry eyes each afternoon. The letters from home, when they came, were passed down the line with reverence, envelopes palmed greedily, as if each one might contain a piece of the life they'd left behind. Elijah unfolded Mina's letter with care, his breath catching as he read her looping script. "Dear Elijah, Pittsburgh is colder than ever, but I imagine it's nothing compared to winter in England. The radiators in the newsroom groan every morning, and the windows fog so thick I can draw faces in the condensation. I think of you when I do, just a small thing to make the days feel less empty. Mama sends her love. She insists you must be eating nothing but potatoes and beans, am I right? I hope you're keeping warm. I knitted you a scarf, but I'm not sure if it will make it past the censors. I suppose all I can send is my thoughts and my hope that you're safe. We had a story come through about the bombings in London. I covered it for the local page, but Mr. Dalton wouldn't let me sign my name. He says it's for the best considering the times. It's strange, writing words that matter but having them float in the world without anyone knowing they're mine. Don't forget me, Elijah. Not even when the days blur together, and you can't recall the sound of my voice. I'll remember for both of us. Love, Mina." He pressed the paper to his lips, eyes closed. In the tense, cold dimness, her words were a lifeline. He clung to them, even as the world outside threatened to reshape him into someone he barely recognized. A shout from the tent entrance broke his trance. "Row! Lieutenant wants you. Briefing in 5. He tucked the letter away, smoothing the edges with a practiced thumb, and steeled himself for the next order. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Across the Atlantic, Pittsburgh's winter pressed in with a different kind of heaviness. Mina Takahashi hunched over her typewriter in the corner of the Post-Gazette newsroom. The clatter of keys, a staccato rhythm against the hum of voices, and the crackle of the police radio. Her desk, once a crossroads of camaraderie and urgent whispers, now felt like an island. She scanned her latest story, fingers poised above the keys, searching for the words that would cut through the fog of rumor and fear. But the stories she was allowed to write these days were distant from the ones she cared about. Community rallies for war bonds drive. School children collect scrap metal for troops. Each one scrubbed clean of controversy, her byline often quietly omitted. She remembered the first time Mr. Dalton had called her into his office after Pearl Harbor. He'd spoken with gentle regret, explaining that some readers had voiced concerns about her reporting. He'd suggested she focus on inspirational local events and avoid stories that might draw attention. The message was clear. Stay visible enough to be useful, invisible enough to be safe. It stung, but Mina refused to disappear. In the evenings, she organized letter-writing drives for Japanese-American soldiers. She volunteered in the church basement, rolling bandages and assembling care packages. She attended crowded community meetings, where anxious families whispered about friends in California sent to camps, and whether it was safer to keep their heads down or speak up. At home, the Takahashi apartment had grown quieter. Her father, once the loudest voice at the dinner table, now measured every word. Her mother watched the windows at night, worried that a careless comment might bring trouble to their door. Mina tried to reassure them, but each day brought new rumors. Someone's store vandalized, a neighbor questioned by the FBI. Still, she wrote to Elijah every week. Sometimes she wondered if her letters were the only thing anchoring her to herself. Asterisk, 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 Elijah's life in England was a steady rhythm of cold mud and orders. Intelligence work was a strange dance. Quiet observation, code breaking, field reports delivered in the dead of night. The danger was often invisible, a constant hum beneath the surface. He learned to trust his instincts, to read the smallest shifts in a man's eyes, to weigh every decision with the knowledge that lives might depend on it. His closest friend in the unit was Charles Charlie McPherson, a wiry corporal from rural Virginia with a quick wit and a penchant for whistling old folk tunes. They shared a bunk and, on rare nights off, a flask of whiskey smuggled from the officers' mess. Charlie talked often of his sweetheart back home, letters folded and refolded until the creases wore thin. "How you ever wonder," Charlie mused one night, "if the folks back home remember us the way we remember them?" Elijah hesitated, thinking of Mina's letter, her steady faith that he would come back to her unchanged. "I think they do," he answered quietly. "Or at least they try." Charlie grinned, eyes crinkling. "Suppose that's all we can ask." But Elijah harbored doubts he never voiced. Each passing week chipped away at the man he'd been. The work demanded choices he'd never imagined making, decisions that haunted his sleep. Sometimes, as he watched the English countryside roll by from the window of a lurching troop truck, he wondered if Mina would recognize him when he returned. On a grey afternoon in late January, Elijah was summoned to the officer's tent. Lieutenant Harris, a compact man with prematurely silver hair, gestured him inside. "Rowe, we've intercepted enemy radio traffic east of here. We need someone to slip behind the lines, verify the intel, and report back. You'll be paired with a local contact." Elijah felt a knot tighten in his stomach. These missions were dangerous. Success meant saving lives. Failure could mean capture or worse. He nodded, jaw set. Harris's eyes softened. "You're careful, Rowe. That's why I'm sending you. We need your head on this." As Elijah left the tent, Charlie caught up with him, concern etched in his face. "You're not going alone, are you?" He shook his head. "I'll be with a local. I'll be back before you know it." But as he packed his gear that night, Elijah found himself lingering over Mina's letter, tracing the words with his finger. He read her final line again, "Don't forget me, Elijah," and wondered if he had the right to ask her to remember someone who might never come home. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Mina's world shrank and hardened as winter deepened. She noticed the subtle changes first. Colleagues who once greeted her with easy smiles now offered tight nods, conversations that stopped when she entered the break room. At the market, a shopkeeper who'd known her since childhood avoided her eyes, bagging her groceries with stiff hands. One afternoon, as she waited in a ration line with her mother, a woman in a fur-collared coat turned and stared openly. "I heard they're sending more of your kind to camps out west," the woman announced, her voice loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Maybe it's for the best." "We can't be too careful." Mina's mother stiffened, fingers gripping her arm. Mina forced herself to meet the woman's gaze, her own voice calm and steady. "We're Americans, ma'am. Just like you." The woman sniffed and turned away, but the damage was done. Mina's cheeks burned with humiliation and anger. That night her father cautioned her to keep her head down. "It's safer, Mina," he murmured. "For all of us." But Mina was not content to vanish. Instead, she threw herself into her work. She covered a story on the city's new war garden initiative, interviewing children as they planted seeds in the frozen ground, their breath white in the air. She wrote about the knitting circles and the blood drives, the community's small acts of resistance against fear. Still, her world felt brittle, the walls closing in. She missed Elijah with a fierceness that surprised her. His letters came sporadically, sometimes delayed for weeks, but she treasured each one. The careful way he described the English countryside, the jokes he shared about Charlie, his longing for home. One night, after another shift spent writing stories that would never bear her name, Mina sat at her desk, pen poised above a fresh sheet of paper. The city was quiet outside, snow falling in thick, silent flakes. She wrote, "Elijah, sometimes I wonder if you'd recognize Pittsburgh these days. The city is quieter. Everyone seems to move a little more carefully. There are rumors about more families being questioned, people being watched. It's lonely, but I try to remember what you told me, that hope is a kind of resistance. I hold on to that, and to you. Promise me you'll come home, I'll be waiting. With all my love, Mina." She sealed the letter, tucking a pressed violet inside before slipping it into the post. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Elijah's mission behind enemy lines was a blur of cold, hunger, and fear. He moved at night, shadowed by a young Frenchman named Luc, whose silent competence was a comfort. The intel was good. He located the enemy radio site, memorized the terrain, and made his way back through hedgerows slick with rain. At one point, crouched beneath a ruined stone wall as German voices drifted near, Elijah thought of Mina, her courage, the way she stood her ground even when it cost her. It was that memory that steadied his hands, kept him moving. He returned to camp exhausted but alive, greeted by Charlie's relieved grin. "Told you you'd make it back." Elijah smiled, but he knew each successful mission was a coin flipped. How many more before his luck ran out? That night, he sat on his cot, writing to Mina by candlelight. "Mina, your letters are the best thing I have. I read them until I know them by heart. Sometimes I think I can hear your voice over the wind here. Life is hard, but you remind me who I am and why I'm here. I hope it's enough. Yours, Elijah." He hesitated before sealing the envelope, wanting to say more but lacking the words. In this place, hope felt both precious and dangerous. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Back in Pittsburgh, the world turned colder still. Mina's stories were increasingly sidelined, her presence in the newsroom tolerated but never welcomed. One afternoon, Mr. Dalton called her into his office, his expression unreadable. "Mina, some of the sponsors are expressing concern. They say it's not appropriate for you to be reporting on the war effort." She swallowed, hands twisting in her lap. "I'm just doing my job." He sighed. "I know. But things are tense. Maybe it's best if you focus on community pieces. Human interest, nothing sensitive." Her jaw tightened. "Is it because of my name?" He looked away. "You know how it is." Mina left the office shaking, her sense of self battered but not destroyed. That evening she attended a meeting at the church, where worried families shared news of friends sent to internment camps. Mina listened, took notes, and resolved to tell their stories, if not in print then in her letters to Elijah and in her quiet acts of defiance. She began organizing a series of gatherings, potluck dinners for families of enlisted men, letter-writing circles for soldiers overseas. She worked late into the night, drafting anonymous essays about loyalty and fear, sharing them in the underground community newsletters that passed from hand to hand. Still, the pressure built. She overheard a colleague whisper, "How can we be sure?" as she passed in the hall. A neighbor crossed the street rather than share the sidewalk. Even her father grew more withdrawn, his once boisterous laughter replaced by silence. One day, returning home, Mina found a note taped to their door. "Go home, Japs." She tore it down before her parents could see. That night, she wrote Elijah again, her pen trembling. "Elijah, sometimes I think the world wants us to vanish, but I won't let them erase me. Or us. I miss you. I hope you're safe." Always Mina asterisk 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 Elijah's unit was assigned to a new post near the southern coast, preparing for what the officers called something big. The rumors of an upcoming invasion swirled through camp, filling the air with a restless energy. Elijah's work grew more complex, deciphering coded messages, briefing officers, mapping enemy positions. The danger felt closer, the nights colder. He saw the strain in Charlie's eyes, the way men flinched at sudden noises. Elijah buried himself in his work, but the loneliness was relentless. He wrote to Mina as often as he could, sometimes uncertain that his letters would reach her. One evening, after a harrowing day of drills, Charlie handed him a package, a faded blue scarf, the yarn soft and uneven, Mina's careful stitching visible in every line. Elijah pressed it to his face, the scent of home clinging to the wool. He wore it under his uniform, a secret talisman against the cold. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk March arrived, and with it, a new wave of fear in Pittsburgh. The city buzzed with rumors of sabotage, and the government's call for vigilance turned neighbor against neighbor. The Takahashi family received a summons to report to the local authorities for questioning. Mina's father returned home pale and shaken. "They want to know who we talk to, what we read," he whispered. "It's not safe, Mina." Mina's job at the paper was officially restructured, her hours cut, her assignments reduced to fluff pieces and obituaries. She understood what was happening, but she refused to leave. She continued her community work, refusing to let fear drive her from her city. One night after a long shift at the church, she walked home beneath the flickering streetlights. A figure stepped from the shadows, a boy from her old neighborhood, his face pinched with anger. "You don't belong here, Mina. People are watching." She stood her ground. "This is my home." He spat on the sidewalk, disappearing into the darkness. Mina trembled, but she walked on. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. In England, spring brought a tentative thaw, but the war showed no signs of ending. Elijah's missions grew riskier, the stakes higher. One evening, he overheard a conversation between officers, news of Japanese-American families forced into camps back home. He felt a wave of panic, imagining Mina's face behind barbed wire. That night, he wrote her a long letter, confessing his fear. "Mina, I heard about the camps. I don't know what to say. I wish I could be there to protect you, to stand with you. I never realized how far the world could fall. Please, tell me you're safe. Don't let them silence you. I love you. I always will." Elijah. He waited weeks for her reply, each day gnawing at him. The silence was a new kind of torture, worse than the cold, the fear, or the danger. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Mina's response came at last, a balm to his battered spirit. "Elijah, I'm still here. They haven't taken me yet, though the war's third spring arrived with a grey, bitter chill. In the churned fields of northern France, the world had turned to mud and ash." Elijah Rowe pressed his back against a battered stone wall, his coat heavy with rain and dust, his nerves tuned to every distant thud. The village of Saint-Aubin, what was left of it, huddled beneath low clouds, rooftops split and smouldering. The air tasted of cordite and cold earth. Elijah's hands shook as he unfolded Mina's latest letter, stained at the corners and worn from too many readings. The paper was soft as fabric now, the handwriting a comfort and a sting. He read the closing lines, lips shaping her familiar script. Asterisk, do not forget who you are, Elijah. Do not let the world make you a stranger to yourself. Mina. He folded the letter, tucking it into his breast pocket, close to his heart. Around him, the makeshift headquarters buzzed with the clipped urgency of officers and maps, radios spitting static and code. Somewhere just beyond the shattered church, the front line shifted in the morning fog. He had become a man fluent in silence and secrets. The tasks set before him as an intelligence officer were never simple, and lately they had begun to gnaw. Each coded message, each intercepted dispatch, was a thread in a tapestry of fear, troop movements, sabotage, betrayals whispered in the dark. And always, the knowledge that every decision might cost lives or save them, but never both. He tried to anchor himself in memory, the soft lamplight in his mother's kitchen, Mina's laughter drifting through the cracked window of their favorite cafe, the warmth of her hand in his as the train pulled away from Pittsburgh. But the present dragged at him, relentless. A runner burst into the room, Private Caro, mud up to his knees, eyes wild. "Lieutenant Rowe, new orders, urgent." Elijah snapped to attention. "What is it?" Caro thrust a damp envelope into his hands. "Command says the Resistance's contact in Saint-Aubin never checked in last night. They want you to investigate before we move east. Locals say the Gestapo swept the area at dawn." Elijah's pulse hammered. "Anyone else going?" "Sergeant Bell and me, sir, that's all." He nodded, already feeling the old cold fear settle in his gut. "Let's move." They slipped into the half-lit streets, boots squelching in mud, the ruined houses staring with empty windows. Elijah kept low, leading Bell and Caro down an alley choked with rubble. He scanned for movement, for the telltale flicker of a lantern in the shadows, any sign of the contact or of danger. A door creaked somewhere. Bell's hand tightened on his rifle. Elijah glanced at Caro, whose mouth worked soundlessly, lips pale. They rounded a corner and found her, a girl in a patched dress not much older than Mina, clutching a basket to her chest. Her eyes widened with terror at the sight of the uniforms. Elijah raised both palms. "Nous sommes amis," he whispered. "Anglais. Resistance." She hesitated, then jerked her chin toward the church. "Ils l'ont pris. This morning. The Germans." Elijah's heart sank. "Taken where?" She shook her head, eyes brimming. "I don't know. Maybe the schoolhouse, maybe the farm. They always come at night." Bell cursed under his breath. Elijah steadied his breathing, fighting the urge to run after ghosts. "Merci," he said quietly, and led his men away. They crouched behind a toppled wall. Bell's voice was low. "We can't help them all, sir." Elijah nodded, jaw clenched. "No, but we try." He stared at the broken street, thinking of Mina's words. "Do not let the world make you a stranger to yourself," and wondered if he was failing her, failing himself. How many times had he chosen the safe route, the expedient answer, when the right thing was impossible? A distant explosion rattled the air. Elijah flinched, instinctively reaching for the letter in his pocket. He thought of Mina, alone in Pittsburgh, and the promise they'd made. To remember always, to hold on to each other, even through silence and fear. He wondered if she could feel him reaching for her, across the miles of war. Pittsburgh, spring 1944. The city's skyline had blurred with smoke and fog, the Allegheny River swollen with spring rains. Mina Takahashi hurried along Liberty Avenue, coat buttoned tight against the wind, her press card tucked discreetly into her bag. The news office was a fortress of ticking clocks and typewriter keys, but lately the world outside had been closing in. The headlines were relentless: Pacific battles, rationing, internment, and always the whispered questions, the sideward glances. She had stopped counting the days since her last byline. Mr. Fenton, the managing editor, called her into his office that morning. He didn't meet her eyes. "Mina," he began, "I'm afraid we can't let you cover City Hall anymore. Some of the councilmen have concerns. It's not safe for you, and it's not good for the paper." "I see," Mina said quietly. He cleared his throat. "You can help with the home front column. Human interest, community drives, that sort of thing." She nodded, numb. "Thank you." He hesitated. "You're a good writer, Mina. This will pass." But she saw the fear behind his words. This was not about her writing. She returned to her desk, head high, fingers trembling. The newsroom felt smaller than ever. A few colleagues glanced up, then away. Her friend Louise offered a tight, apologetic smile. Mina opened her notepad, willing herself to focus. There were stories that still needed telling: the mothers organizing scrap drives, the children sending care packages, the old men who swept the stoops every morning out of habit and hope. But she felt the walls closing in, the sense that every word was being watched. After lunch, she slipped into the narrow stairwell and dialed her family's number from the payphone. Her father answered, his voice tired but warm. "Papa, how are you?" she asked. "We are well, Mina. Your mother is making dumplings tonight if you can come." "I'll try," she said. "How is work?" He hesitated. "Quiet. Some customers don't come anymore. But we manage. Your mother worries for you." "I'm all right," Mina lied. "Tell her not to worry." She hung up, heart heavy. Even home no longer felt safe. Some nights, she caught her parents speaking in whispers, debating whether to keep the old family photographs or hide them. The neighbors on their floor no longer stopped to chat in the hallway. Still, Mina refused to disappear. She attended community meetings, gathering in church basements with other Japanese-American families, sharing news and comfort. She wrote letters to soldiers, hundreds by now, carefully composed in a hand that grew steadier with each page. Mostly she wrote to Elijah. His replies came sporadically, battered by censors and time. She read them by the window at night, the river's dark ribbon threading the city beyond. He wrote of rain and longing, of the way the world changed shape when you were far from home. He never spoke of danger, but she read it in the spaces between his lines. Some days she wondered if he would come back to her at all. Some days she wondered what would be left for him if he did. In France, Elijah huddled in the shell of an old farmhouse, radio pressed to his ear. The broadcast crackled with static. Then a voice. "Allied forces moving at dawn. Resistance to prepare. Repeat, at dawn." He scribbled the message, heart racing. The planned offensive would sweep through Saint-Aubin by morning. The villagers, the resistance contacts, they were in the path of fire. He swallowed hard. Orders were clear. Observe, report, do not engage. But as night fell, Elijah stared out at the darkened fields and saw Mina's face in the glass. Her gaze steady, her voice urging him not to lose himself. He remembered the girl in the patched dress, the fear in her eyes. He made his decision. "Belle, Caro, come with me. We're warning the villagers." Belle's eyes widened. "Sir, "Those aren't our orders." Elijah's jaw set. "They are tonight." They moved through the fields like shadows, slipping between patrols, knocking softly on doors. The villagers scattered, gathering what they could carry, fleeing toward the woods. Elijah's heart pounded as he guided them, every step a risk. At dawn, Allied tanks rolled into the village, shells bursting over rooftops. Elijah and his men huddled with the last group of refugees at the edge of the woods, watching smoke rise over Saint-Aubin. He thought of Mina, of the promise he'd made to her not to forget who he was. He had broken his orders, but he had saved lives. For once, the world felt a little less cruel. Pittsburgh. The Takahashi apartment was quiet when Mina arrived, her shoes damp from the rain. Her mother met her at the door, worry etched into her face. "We had another letter," her mother whispered, holding out an envelope. "This one, it was opened." Mina's hands shook as she took it. The return address was from a soldier she didn't know. She opened the letter, her pulse hammering. Inside, a single sentence asterisk. "We know who your daughter writes to. Be careful." Her mother's lips trembled. "Should we stop?" Mina stared at the words, anger rising. "No," she said fiercely. "They want us to be afraid. I won't hide." That night, as the city slept, she sat at her desk and wrote to Elijah. She told him of the threats, of the fear that stalked their days. She told him how she clung to hope, even as the world tried to make her invisible. When she finished, she held the letter to her lips, whispering the words she had spoken that morning at the station. "Don't forget me." Weeks later, Elijah stood before his superior, Captain Faraday. The air between them brittle. "You endangered your men, Rowe. You disobeyed a direct order." Elijah met his gaze, steady. "I saved lives, sir." Faraday's face softened almost imperceptibly. "Sometimes the right thing and the smart thing aren't the same. But I'll make sure this goes no further. You're a good man, Rowe. Don't let the war take that from you." Outside, Elijah felt the weight of the world lift, just a little. He reached for Mina's letter, rereading her closing words. For the first time since arriving in France, he allowed himself to believe he might survive this. He might see her again. But hope, like war, was never simple. In Pittsburgh, Mina arrived at work to find her desk cleared, her nameplate gone. Mr. Fenton avoided her gaze. "I'm sorry, Mina, the board voted last night. There's nothing I can do." She fought to keep her voice steady. "Because of my name?" He hesitated, then nodded. "It's not fair, but it's the world right now." She gathered her things, each item a piece of her old life. Her battered notepad, her favorite pen, the photograph of Elijah tucked into her dictionary. As she stepped into the corridor, Louise caught her arm. "You didn't deserve this." Mina smiled, tears shining in her eyes. "None of us do." She stepped into the street, the city noisy and indifferent. She wondered where she would go, what she would become, but she remembered Elijah's letters, the steady faith in his words. She would not disappear. She would find a way to be heard. That night, as rain tapped against the window, Mina wrote again. This time she wrote for herself, for all those who could not speak. She wrote her story, her family's story, the story of a city that looked away. She sent it to every paper in Pennsylvania, unsigned. In France, Elijah crouched in the ruins of a church, the letter from Mina pressed to his chest. The world outside was chaos, artillery fire, shouts in the dark. But inside he was anchored to her words. He read her final line, the one that echoed across every letter, every memory. "Don't forget me." He closed his eyes, and in the hush between explosions, he heard her voice, steady, unbroken, calling him home. He would not forget. He would come back to her, or die trying. Outside, the first rays of dawn broke over the field, painting the shattered stones with gold. The war was not over. But something inside Elijah shifted. He was no longer lost. 3 weeks later, a package arrived at the Takahashi apartment, wrapped in plain brown paper. Inside, Mina found a copy of the asterisk Pittsburgh Gazette. Her story, printed on the front page. The byline read simply, "A voice from home." Her hands shook as she read it, tears slipping down her cheeks. Across the ocean, Elijah received a battered envelope. Inside was a clipping of the article and a note in Mina's careful hand. I told our story. I am not invisible. Neither are you. Come home to me. Don't forget me. Elijah pressed the letter to his lips, heart pounding with hope and fear. He folded the clipping, tucking it into his chest pocket, and stepped out into the morning light, toward the end of the war and whatever waited for him on the other side. In the end, love was the only thing the world couldn't take from them, and in both their hearts the words remained, "Don't forget me." The sky over Pittsburgh was the color of pewter, shot through with streaks of late autumn gold. The streets, still slick from the morning's drizzle, reflected city lights, amber and blue, flickering in the puddles like distant memories. It was November 1945, and the city had begun to breathe again, war-shadowed but alive with the tentative hope of peace. Soldiers in uniform filtered through the crowds, some still clutching duffel bags, others arm in arm with loved ones, as if afraid that letting go might undo the miracle of return. Elijah Rose stood before the familiar stoop of his family's home, his hand hovering over the brass doorknob. He had imagined this moment in 1,000 variations, some full of joy, others laced with dread. For months the idea of home had been a distant star, barely visible above the thunder of artillery and the endless grey of French mornings. Now the world was quieter, but the silence was not peace. The city felt both unchanged and unrecognizable, like a photograph left too long in the sun. He hesitated, studying the window, the same gingham curtains, the faint glow of a lamp. The scent of wet leaves drifted on the air, and for a moment he was a boy again, running up these steps after school, satchel swinging. But the man who had crossed oceans and witnessed the ruin of villages returned with a different gait, carrying the invisible weight of memory. Inside, the house was thick with the smells of bread and old books. His mother's arms wrapped around him before he could set down his pack, her embrace fierce and trembling. His father's handshake was a silent acknowledgement of pride and relief, and his younger brother hovered in the hallway, grown taller and more serious in his absence. There were tears, laughter, awkward silences, gestures that said, "We are whole again," even as the shape of their wholeness had changed. That evening, Elijah sat in the quiet parlor, a mug of tea warming his hands. The clock ticked with gentle insistence. His family tried to fill the spaces with conversation, asking about rations, the weather in France, whether the rumors of Paris's liberation were true. But the questions he longed for, the truths he feared, lingered unspoken. He caught himself glancing toward the window, as if the answer to his restlessness waited outside. He excused himself and stepped onto the porch. The city hummed in the distance, a streetcar bell, a dog barking, the low murmur of voices. He wondered if Mina was somewhere out there, walking these streets as she had so many times before, notebook in hand, eyes bright with purpose. In the months overseas, her letters had been his lifeline, each envelope a piece of solid ground amid the chaos. But after the news of the camps, the letters had become more infrequent, their words more cautious, as if she feared the world was listening. He remembered the last time he had seen her, standing in the rain at Union Station, her hand slipping from his as the train pulled away. "Don't forget me," she had whispered, words that had haunted him in the trenches, echoing in every dark hour, every moment he doubted he would return. He pulled a worn envelope from his breast pocket, Mina's last letter, dated weeks before the surrender. He traced her handwriting, memorized the curve of each letter. "Come home safe. I still believe in us, even if the world makes it hard to remember who we are. Don't forget me." He closed his eyes. Through the fog of exhaustion and the ache of loss, it was her voice that steadied him. The next morning dawned slate-gray and brisk. Elijah walked the familiar blocks of his neighborhood, the city stirring to life around him. He passed the bakery where Mina used to buy sweet red bean buns for his family, the park where they'd once sat on a summer afternoon, sharing stories and secret hopes. The world looked the same, but everywhere he turned, he felt the absence of her, a missing note in a well-loved song. When he reached the corner near the river, he stopped. The park bench where they had spent so many evenings was still there, weathered and empty. He lowered himself onto it, the chill of the iron seeping through his coat, and watched the water slide past, swift and impassive. It was here, he realized, that he had first told Mina he loved her, awkward, earnest, the words tumbling out between nervous laughter and the soft hum of cicadas. She had smiled, her eyes shining with something between amusement and wonder, and squeezed his hand. Now as the river rushed by, he let the silence settle. He replayed their conversations, the dreams they had spun, and the promises made in the shadow of uncertainty. He wondered if she would come, if perhaps, sensing his return, she might find her way back to this place. The city's bells struck noon. A flock of pigeons scattered as footsteps approached, deliberate, light. Elijah looked up, heart thudding. At first, he saw only a figure in a dark wool coat, hair tucked beneath a sensible hat. But as she drew closer, the shape of her face, the determined set of her jaw, became achingly familiar. Mina. She paused, a few paces away, uncertainty flickering in her gaze. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, but her eyes, dark, steady, searched his face, as if afraid that time and distance had changed him beyond recognition. He rose, words tangled on his tongue. For a moment they simply stood, caught between the past and the impossible present. Finally, Mina broke the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. "You came back." He nodded, emotion tightening his throat. "I promised, didn't I?" She laughed, a sound that was part relief, part disbelief. "I almost stopped believing in promises." He took a step closer, hands trembling. "Mina, He faltered, searching her eyes for permission to hope. She shook her head, tears glinting. "Don't," she said softly. "Just be here, please." They sat side by side on the bench, the river flowing steadily before them. For a while, neither spoke. The city moved around them, but the world seemed to shrink to the space between their shoulders, the warmth of her hand slipping quietly into his. Mina was thinner than he remembered, her posture more guarded, as if bracing for disappointment. She told him in halting words of the months after he left, the suspicion, the whispers, the way neighbors averted their eyes. Her job at the paper had vanished overnight, and her family had been forced to move, seeking anonymity in a city that no longer felt like home. She spoke of her father's resignation, her mother's quiet sorrow, of friends who disappeared and the constant battle to prove her loyalty to a country that saw her as other. Elijah listened, grief and anger warring within him. He wanted to apologize for the world, for the cruelty that had shadowed her every step. But Mina squeezed his hand, as if sensing his thoughts. "I'm still here," she said quietly, "and so are you. That has to mean something." He nodded, understanding dawning like sunlight after a long storm. The war had not ended for them with the signing of a treaty or the return of a soldier. The wounds, visible and invisible, would take longer to heal, but here together they could begin. They talked until the afternoon sun dipped low, tracing gold across the river. Mina recounted how she had started writing again, this time not for a newspaper, but for herself and her community. She organized gatherings in borrowed church basements, telling the stories of families who had been silenced, giving voice to memories at risk of fading. There was bitterness in her words, but also a stubborn hope, a refusal to let hate define her life. Elijah shared fragments of his own story, the faces of men lost, the burden of secrets kept, how he had clung to the cadence of her letters, the certainty that someone still believed in who he was, even when he doubted himself. "You saved me," he whispered, voice raw. "Every word you sent, every memory you gave me to hold on to." Mina smiled through her tears. "You never forgot me." He shook his head, emotion overwhelming. Not for a moment. There were things they could not fix, the years lost, the scars left by war and prejudice. But as dusk settled, they found solace in the simple act of being present, of listening, forgiving, and daring to imagine a future stitched together from the remnants of hope. The city's lights blinked on one by one, as if the world itself was waking from a long darkness. They stood, uncertain, but together. Mina's fingers threaded through Elijah's, and for the first time in years he felt the quiet certainty of belonging. He turned to her, voice steady. "Whatever comes next, we face it together. No more goodbyes." She nodded, her smile radiant. No more forgetting. Hand in hand they walked through the city's evening glow, their shadows trailing behind, two survivors, changed but unbroken, forging a path forward in a world remade by loss and love. Their story, like so many others, was not just about war or survival. It was about the promise to remember to carry each other's light through the darkness and to choose again and again to hope. And for those listening now, if you've ever clung to a memory or held out hope when the world seemed to forget you, know that you are not alone. Sometimes it's the whispered words in the hardest moments that carry us home. If Elijah and Mina's journey moved you, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Perhaps you've known a love tested by distance or hardship, or maybe you have your own story of hope and resilience to tell. Leave a like if you believe, like they did, that love and memory can outlast any storm. And if you'd like to hear more stories that linger in the heart, remember to subscribe and ring the notification bell, so you never miss a moment or a voice that reminds you of what's truly worth remembering. Because sometimes the most important words are the ones we carry with us, through war, through sorrow, through all the uncertain days to come. Don't forget me. And in the echo of those words we find our way home.